Good morning and welcome to AMA Puget Sound's Coffee Talk series, live on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Our guest today is Michael Stevens. Hi.
Hey,
Hi, Michael.
Julie.
How are you
Hi.
today?
I'm doing great.
Excellent, excellent. And how's the weather by you? You're up in North Seattle. I'm in Renton, and it's
Okay.
very sunny.
It is, and that's difficult. I'm not usually on a video with other people at this time, like their internal calls and things like that. And I had sun blaring in on my face, and I'm like, of all the days to
Right?
be on a coffee talk, it's a sunny day in Seattle. So it's pretty nice up here too.
Yes, it is. So, yeah, I actually had to turn off some lights. Like, oh, that's too
That's
much light
it's
now.
natural light. Wow.
Mhm. Yay!
Yeah.
Should have done this at the golden hour. Darn it.
Excellent.
So we are not here to talk about the weather. We neither of us are in the weather industry. We are in the marketing industry. So let's learn about you. Where you work for Translated, and I want to learn more about that. This sounds like a really fascinating company. I did go to the website and poke around a little bit, but I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah. So Translated has a really interesting mission and one that has really captured my imagination. And that is we're working to create a world in which people understand and are understood. It's really, really that simple. And just personally, from the time I was a young kid, I was really fascinated by the limitations of language. And I remember at some point when it dawned on me, when I say the word, the classic one is table, but I think it was dog for me. When I say dog, in my mind, I'm seeing my childhood dog, and the person I'm talking to is not.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cynical, but I was like, we don't understand anything about each other. And this was like at 6 years old, where I was like, this is no wonder the world has so many things going on and problems and things to overcome. As a company, we're seeking to solve that and work towards a future where a lot of the other things that are trying to be solved today, whether it's environmental pieces, inclusion, getting to other planets to live on. If you have communication that works between people, you can achieve those things. As long as communication is a hindrance in getting those things done, it's going to be hard to get any of that stuff done. And
Sure.
You can extrapolate it into all the woes of social media and misunderstandings there. We just happen to think it's even more severe when people come from different language backgrounds. And so I stole it from a dear friend, but when he's in a cab and we'll be talking to the cab driver and we'll say, oh, what language do you speak? And they'll be like, oh, cab drivers always speak multiple languages. And we'll go, but what's your native language? And they're like, oh, I speak them all. No, what does your mom speak to you in? And it changes the conversation, right? Because it's the Nelson Mandela quote, where it's like, if you speak to a person in a language they understand, you hit their head. But if you speak to the language in which they grew up with, it speaks to their heart.
Yeah.
And so that's really what we're trying to achieve as a company. What that means commercially, we translate products, we translate marketing campaigns, and for those who are in the industry, we talk about localization, right? Localization came out of the software industry, and it was not just making sure that you get the text correctly, but that it's internationalized. So date formats are right, and currencies are right, and all of those things are aligned. Now, localization is kind of adapted and people use it casually. Marketers use it all the time because they want to say, I want this to sound like it's coming from the local context.
Right.
It's a neat word as to how it's evolved, even within our industry.
That's so important. And you brought a really great point, is how much communication can be a barrier as well as a door to getting information across. And one thing that I think I mentioned, it was in the last episode with Kimfer, English can be a hard language simply because there are so many similes and metaphors. And my sons are learning that right now, like and as. That's, be wary of those sentences and just say what you mean. And I would imagine saying what you mean can make the translation process that much simpler.
It can. We often guide companies and I've worked for a few different companies in this industry that when our clients go global, when they decide to become international, when they take on processes to help them introduce different languages for their marketing materials or their products, it actually makes them a better company.
Mm-hmm.
They write better English content. They're more focused on what actually matters. For years, Google, and they may still have it, when you would create an event, it had a little thing at the top that said breakfast at Tiffany's was the default like subject line for the event title.
Mm-hmm.
How much of the world gets that reference? And at the time, Google was localizing every product they had into 45 languages.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're asking a translator then on the far end to go, they're like, breakfast at Tiffany's?
What's that? Yeah.
Or they're like, I know that it's a movie, but why would this be in the subject line of this event I'm creating?
That would be like putting a whole bunch of sample names as Art Vandelay,
Right.
Not many, outside of the US.
Who Art Vandelay is.
It's a Seinfeld reference.
Okay. Oh my gosh. And what I love that you did there is when people go, you could have done it with me. I usually don't say I'm making a Seinfeld. People go, oh, have you seen the Seinfeld? Because the answer is always yes. And this is one that I didn't get. So, oh, sorry. Now I'm going to go back.
The pretzels make you thirsty. But I mean, my husband, he's in the past, he's done testing, and he just the test names he comes up with, it would only be funny to somebody who grew up in this country.
Mm-hmm.
For in the last 40 years, and so that can be such a problem because, you might be using a test case with somebody from another country and they might think, oh, that's a real person. Like, no, that was a test name,
mm-hmm.
rather than just using test name.
Yeah. And companies, when they're localizing and with their brands, the strength of their brand can dictate the approach they use. So for Apple, for instance, they don't have a brand, right? They have a culture. So why would they be worried too much about positioning their brand correctly in markets? Because actually, we're going to just be spreading Apple culture forward in order to sell our products and attract people. Like they also say they don't do marketing, right? Like we just create great products. Like, then why do you spend so much money on the music and the commercials? Right. But we can discuss it. That's cool.
Yeah. Which budget does that go under?
Yeah, exactly. It's probably marketing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then there are other companies who look at this from a strategic competitive perspective, where probably a number of designers who are listening are familiar with the tool Canva. So it's an Adobe competitor. I love Canva too. They're beautiful, wonderful, and really, I think, the face of what it means to be an international company. But it all came from their business strategy. It helped that they're Australian, first of all, so they're already sort of dispositioned to think globally. You didn't know they were Australian, right? Because they feel like they're everywhere. Like wherever you are, you think they're like from there.
Right.
They looked at the markets that Adobe dominated, and they realized there are about 12 of them.
Okay.
And they're like, we could move into those markets, but we will always be second players. Mm-hmm. So if we move into the next 100 markets, which we could probably cover with about 45, maybe 50 languages to support, mm-hmm. we're going to be the first mover in those markets, and mm-hmm. we're going to be able to feel like we're native. And we're going to be able to take our design templates and work with designers in those regions to come up with things. Our holiday templates are going to have the regional holidays. Like mm-hmm. they went full force into mm-hmm. international and really marketed themselves well. They had missteps here and there, but overall, they really became this global brand. And mm-hmm. now I used to say, who knows Canva? And it would be crickets, and they had impact. It's up there. Adobe and Canva are known synonymously.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not a designer, so for me, Canva is one of those products that are just so easy to use. And
mm-hmm.
it does speak to that demographic too in those markets. If you're not a designer, Canva's great for you.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. I did not know they were from Australia. I
Yeah,
learned something new.
yeah.
Let's learn some more new things. So, in addition to language and other elements, what are other elements besides language that are really, really important and critical to marketers to be using?
Yeah, I spoke to a couple. They're all the sort of technical pieces that fall under internationalization. That is making sure you're using the correct date formats. Counting can be different in different languages, different cultures. Like Japanese count different things in different ways.
Okay.
We had one issue years ago, and I mean, this can be colossal. There was a launch. One of the app stores was hitting a certain milestone, and the actual number used in this market was not the right milestone. And so it was like, like this is ruining up the whole marketing message of what we're doing here. So those are important things. Many of them, and I have an example of this, if you're using experienced linguists in those countries, in those regions, they're able to catch this for their clients. We had a campaign that was for the iPod, right? That's what we used to call them. And it was about treat them like a rock star. And it was Secretary's Day in the camp. Treat them like a rock star. The Korean linguists we work with read that and were like, do you guys know K-pop? Like, it would be really weird for a boss to treat his secretary like a K-pop rock star because they're kind of like godlike.
Yeah.
So you want to treat them good, but be careful. Like, it has a bunch of weird implications. And so they adapted the campaign. And many companies are learning these lessons. And like part of it is like, it's about sort of inclusion.
Yes.
Do you have people who are able to say, I'm from that country. This reads weird. This reads wrong. This actually could get you in trouble.
Yeah.
So that's one part. I think a lot of companies are better with that piece of it. The other part is having leadership who prioritize international. For a long time, localization was the very end of the marketing campaign going out. It was the very end of the product life cycle. So whatever funds were left, and it was usually pennies on the dollar compared to what the campaign cost or what the product development went. It was like, oh, can we throw this into 12 languages and have it by like tomorrow? And it was a very unreal expectation for why would you spend so much time and energy in support of your brand in the English version, but just think that any person off the street could do, even major markets, French, German, Italian, Spanish, Chinese, Japanese. Like, no, you need to take some time and some investment. There's nuance, some consulting.
Yeah. Otherwise, that sounds very, very hubristic and very insulting to the folks in those other local regions and local markets. It's rude.
Well, the phrase was pretty commonplace, U.S. and the rest of the world, for big global corporations. It really, and I talk a lot about Apple because I worked with them during the time of the iPhone launch and some really huge growth times. The moment their revenue internationally exceeded 60% of their total revenue, they were like, oh yeah, this is important. Right? Like this is key. We can be really good at this. Absolutely. And you see companies over and over again really be good. Like to give credit, I like Apple, but to give credit to Microsoft, they were really sort of set the standard in the bar for what happens in communicating globally. There were the Microsoft standards for translation that were written to help with marketing and product development that any linguist worth their weight in salt 20 years ago had experience with, knew them in and out, and it allowed them to work for multiple software companies who were doing work internationally.
Mm-hmm. Which then just made everything better, because then those companies were then taking on and then being a role model for other companies. So
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like it was a snowball effect almost.
There was, and there was the competitive effect of
Mm-hmm.
Google starting to go international and realizing what's there and saying, well, we just want to be distinct
Yeah.
from what Microsoft is doing. And then Apple came into the mix, and these big, huge players. And Amazon was kind of late to the whole game with it as far as international, but they've caught up pretty quickly. I mean, not, and I distinguish between what having a company that is their reach is international and being like a international or global company. They're very different. It's
Sure.
this idea of like our culture dictates the rest of the world, or we're sensitive and listening and taking advantage of people's expertise in each region and area.
Right, right. Which can create jobs.
It creates better customer experiences. It creates so many good benefits to our businesses.
Exactly, exactly. So when a company is interested in starting the process where they think, okay, we're ready for localization. We're ready to start doing that and expanding to international sales. Where do you start? What do you recommend? I mean,
So who has the power in the company, right? Marketers are always like sometimes it's the marketer, sometimes it's the product team in this.
mm-hmm.
If it's the product team, it is often what customers do we have who need this as a feature is the way they look at it.
Okay.
That's one way to do it. Marketers, even if they're getting pushed into localization through a product team like that, that's a really big opportunity to start adding value to the whole conversation around international expansion. Because maybe that is the right choice, and maybe it is the best investment of time and energy by the company. But looking at what regions are people interacting with our product or our website or our marketing campaign in English, where English isn't the dominant language. So where do we already have some sense of momentum, and is that translating into use right now, or can we do some tests and create a landing page and see if we can drive traffic for people to sign up that is in another language? So that's one of the parts that my undergraduate degree was in marketing. My hope was to be like a creative designer and do commercials and make pretty things and teach the world to sing, and that whole part. I went to the dark side for most of my career and have been sort of driving sales. But in thinking about sales, I always thought in marketing systems.
Sure.
And so I was really grateful for, yes, the role of sort of the sale is to that transaction piece, and there are fewer people who you would interact with. But if marketing is done well, it's a lot easier to do that last step.
Yeah.
So let's get that system in place. And the only way to get that system in place is to test and iterate. And the tools that are out there right now available to marketers to be able to experiment both with your current clients, your current market segment, and then start thinking internationally of like, one great story for adoption was, I guess it is product and marketing, is Facebook. Facebook was big in India to begin with. The default language offered was English. There were multiple languages, and they continued to experiment with what is going to be the next language offered in the language pick list when someone's registering in India. And they ended up optimizing that process and saw their adoption rate, that people who were falling off of the sign-up flow, it rocket shipped, and they had so many more new users because they were choosing because there's so many languages in regions of like you're talking a region could be speaking 6 different languages there. But Facebook had the ability to offer, most people were using English, but then Hindi may be the second most popular language there, but maybe their regional language or dialect was the one that got them to sign up. And to offer that as the second option in the sign-up flow made their adoption go through the roof.
Sure.
So I think looking as to where you already have momentum and potential is one way to do it. Another, and there's a story that I love from early days with Tableau software here locally, where they were deciding to expand internationally. They saw that the data was showing them Japan is a heavy user of BI software, and they wanted to move into that. When they decided how to go into Japan, they let the values of the company dictate their move. So we were working on a bunch of videos that were introductions to the product and the company. And the Christian was the CEO at the time, and he was on the call, and he said, okay, who are the voice talent we're using? And we're like, well, we chose a middle-aged man who, sounds professional and nice, and he's like, that's not what we do on our videos. And we're like, well, as people who have helped people go into Japan before, this is what's expected in the business community. And, you don't want to alienate. And he's like, no. Like, we want to be making opportunities for young women in business, even in Japan. And so let's choose a younger talent. Let's choose someone very lively, and it's going to be a female voice. And I was like, well, as the person who's helping you do this, I'm going to give you the risks. From a personal standpoint, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's awesome. Like, way to sort of stir it up. And then, that has other positive benefits from, like, hey, these guys are doing things different. So it's not always about just figuring out what the data tells you is the best way. Sometimes go in and disrupt it a bit and go for some unforeseen path as well.
Yeah, exactly. And from there, they were able to serve an underrepresented group. And that, I'm sure, really did a lot to expand in that area for younger girls to pursue a career in that. That sounds so cool. And that's one of those things where it's okay to take a risk. Because you don't know until you do it.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that is still hotly debated within our industry, whereas I think marketing has come so far, and if you're a director or above in marketing, the ROI of every campaign you're running, like, you breathe on a platform and what that cost and what the return is. For localization, it's been a lot harder because it can be intertwined with marketing very close. So was it the effectiveness of the campaign, or how well it was localized, or did they have good sales efforts in that company that drove, or in that country that drove revenue? Our company we deploy services, but it's all about our products. And so we're actually working on a product that is about measuring ROI for the cost of localization.
Wow. Okay.
And, and it's essentially like Google Analytics for localization.
Okay.
And it's I see it as a pretty remarkable product. It's sort of the big ticket of, like, if localization directors and VPs of marketing just had this, they could be making better decisions about where to invest their dollars, what countries, where to stop investing dollars, because they've reached the top market share there. And so, yeah,
very strategic. And so very good advice of, take what you already have, so if you have a group in a certain region already using that product or service, kind of build on what you have there. But what happens, or what do you suggest when you have that one director who says, bah, let's go into this market. We have no footing there whatsoever, but gosh darn, we want to get into it.
Well, even that is the one thing I would warn against, even more than just that, is, hey, I've got a cousin who could do the Spanish campaign for us. Just because it's easy and, like, close doesn't mean it's right. And
right. Yeah, exactly.
And so you wouldn't say, oh man, I think my nephew just graduated with a degree and is a developer. Let's have him build our product, right? You wouldn't, that thinking is so flawed that just because someone speaks two languages or multiple languages, that it makes them a good translator and
Right.
helpful in capturing the stuff. So
Yeah.
the director, I mean, do you report into them? Are you persuading them? I mean, there are all sorts. I love getting into localization makes the entire business better. And so being able to frame the conversation around alternatives with people. The first language, there were two languages that Shopify went into.
Okay.
They had to do French because they're in Canada.
Oh, yeah.
They did Spanish.
Okay.
Oh, and I just spoke with someone the other day. They did a third one because their head of engineering was from Brazil, I think. I think it was Brazil. Now, it's a large market. It's one of the largest markets in the world. So, but was it the most strategic, or was it because this person of influence had connections there? For years and years and years, the Microsoft translation tool, the MT tool, machine translation tool, their Brazilian scores were a lot better than all the other languages that it translated, because the head of Microsoft Translator was Brazilian, and in his free time would do QA work to make sure it worked better. So that's not always the worst direction. The worst direction is I'm doing it because it's easy. I'm doing it because I know someone. If you have a director who you really think is just wrong, create alternatives and show what other markets have to offer and how easy they could be, and then present that.
Right.
Because all of that data is there. I mean, marketers, that's the power within organizations, right? We know our users, we know our customers, we know all that part, and we can really help make recommendations as to where to find that flywheel that makes the whole thing better.
Right. You can't argue with data. You can't argue with numbers. So go where the data leads you.
Yeah.
And what your customers are asking for, because I would imagine at some point there is some feedback from customers or potential customers asking, hey, can you translate this in this language? We would really like it in this area. So, okay. I'm looking at the time, and it looks like we only have a few minutes left, which I can't believe that we just started.
I know. I like this stuff. I could talk about it all day.
I could too. It's really fascinating. It's not something that I'm very familiar with. I actually had a friend in college. She majored in Spanish and Portuguese, and she wanted to be a translator. So that was really kind of fascinating.
I get to speak to my daughter's middle school and their career day. She goes to public school here in Seattle. And I was telling you earlier, Julie, that the school, over 30 languages are spoken by families in the school. And I was so excited, and I actually was super nervous to talk to these kids, because I'm like, for some of these families, first generation here in the US, like the fact that this industry exists could be new to them and could be inspiring to them. And I really wanted to let them know how amazing it is. It's opening up the world to people. And I studied a few languages, and I'd say I was a C minus student in every language I ever studied. I never quite got it. Since I've been in this industry, I realized I'll learn the language just because I want to be a part of the culture and be with the people. And so I work for an Italian company now, and what you can probably tell by my hands, I'm working on speaking Italian in that part. So it's really a keystone for people to be able to connect with each other, whether that's through business and with our marketing and our products, or just with each other as human beings.
Right, exactly. Imagine how many more cool things can be done if that barrier is removed. How many people can get the services they need if that barrier is removed? Or it's just amazing. And I actually have two more questions for you.
Sure.
What are one or two brands that are really doing it well? I know you mentioned Canva, which was fantastic. Is there another one that you'd like to kind of give them credit?
Yeah, I've mentioned a couple who I've admired over the years, for sure. Canva tends to have a sweet spot in my heart, for sure. I will give the principle that I think companies are doing, and maybe some more will come to mind for me. And it's that principle that we want our customers to feel like this was made for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of, it's not just money that gets invested to do that. There's a lot of thoughtfulness that goes into what we're doing. And I still feel like instead of getting people to that point of conversation, I'm having to say, yes, the machines have some really good uses when it comes to language, but protect the parts of your brand that are important from the machines. And like humans just do some things better. And so my company offers machine translation to every linguist who wants to use it, but it's as a tool to make them more efficient and better. And if they can get the level of quality and creativity that they want to have for that particular project and use MT, awesome. But like, you don't give the keys to the kingdom of your brand to a machine that we still, frankly, we know it works. Neural machine translation is amazing, and the results when they're good are good. I talk to data scientists all the time. They don't really know why it works. So we have to put a lot of restraints around to make sure it works correctly. But why it works is kind of magic, which is pretty fun.
Yep. And I'm sure context has a lot to do with it.
Huge part.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. I along with you, I could listen. You could talk about it. I could listen all day about this. This is so fascinating, and just how much our world really, the world itself is just, it's not as big as it used to be. And tools like this, translation tools, are just making the world just closer together, and I love it.
You inspired me as you were saying that, and I think because it's so much of like in my blood right now. Our single largest client is Airbnb. Okay. And so we helped Airbnb go from 32 languages in their offering to 64 that they have now. And talk about a intimate brand-driven product. I mean, you're letting people into your house. You know, you need to be able to communicate safety and security and welcomeness and hospitality and love and like all of these concepts that are big. One of the projects we got to do for them in this expansion was, what does the concept of home, HOME, mean in different cultures?
That's so cool.
And what would be really cool is to redo that now, since we're in the pandemic, to be able to say, wow, this has changed now to office, to childcare, to all these things in certain cultures, and maybe it was there before, maybe not, and so that's another brand I think a lot of people would say internationally are doing a really great job on it.
Yeah, they pretty much had to. Yeah. I mean, they pretty much had to, especially with world travelers and people from different regions. They are a company to look at. For the things that they've accomplished in the last few years.
And if you think of the brand difference between another great company that's international is Expedia, but like what it means to capture that little bit more because it's somebody's house, and all of that. So
exactly, how do you? Oh gosh, it's fascinating. It really is, and love to bring you back at some point. For those of you who are AMA Puget Sounders, we do have a survey. I'm going to link it below on Market Mix, and Michael, I'd love to have you be a part of that. Formally inviting you. So Market Mix is a day-long conference. We are doing a survey right now. Are we going to do it this year? And is it going to be in person? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be online only? Is it going to be October, November, December? Link below. We want this open to more than just folks in the Puget Sound region. We'd love to have folks from all over attend our event when we can finally go back to in person. So,
excellent. And Julie, I've attended the in-person events in the past, and they're great.
Thank you very much. Yes, we were talking about earlier, you've been to our DEI Real Talk events, our quarterly events. Kimfer, who was in our episode last week, she was the VP of DEI who launched that very program.
Fabulous.
So excellent. Michael, thank you so much for your time today. We did go over slightly, but I hope that's okay.
It is. Thanks, Julie.
Perfect. Thank you again. And have a great, it's spring now, so enjoy the weather for everybody watching. Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Have a good one.